Princess Zorava stood rigid at the observation window, her iridescent scales gleaming under the soft lights of the diplomatic vessel. The approaching human shuttle grew larger against the backdrop of stars. This would be her first face-to-face meeting with a human representative, and as heir to the Scylestrian throne, she needed to project perfect composure. "Your Highness, the human delegation has docked," reported Commander Vex, her chief security officer. "One representative will board as agreed." Zorava nodded, her four-fingered hand adjusting the royal sash across her slender frame. "Proceed with security protocols." The tales of humans had reached across the galaxy long before their ships had. Unpredictable, emotional, dangerous, yet also innovative and determined. The Scylestrian Empire needed this alliance, even if tradition suggested caution. The airlock hissed open. Zorava's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of nervousness she hadn't displayed since childhood. Jack Miller stepped through the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. He was taller than Zorava expected, with dark hair cut short and clear blue eyes that immediately found hers across the chamber. "Princess Zorava," he said with a bow that seemed practiced but sincere. "Thank you for welcoming me aboard. I bring greetings from Earth." Something strange happened the moment he spoke. Zorava felt her primary heart accelerate, while her secondary heart skipped several beats. Her scales along her neck flushed a deeper blue, a reaction she couldn't control. "Ambassador Miller," she managed to reply, her voice steady despite the unexpected physical reactions. "The Scylestrian Empire welcomes this opportunity for dialogue." As Jack approached, Zorava's discomfort intensified. Her hands trembled slightly, imperceptible to the human, but noticeable to Commander Vex, who moved subtly closer to his princess. "Please," she gestured to the conference area, maintaining her distance. "We have prepared refreshments suitable for human consumption." Jack smiled, another shock to Zorava's system. The expression transformed his face in a way that made her third eyelid flutter involuntarily. "That's very thoughtful," Jack said. "I understand our physiologies are quite different." If only he knew how her body was betraying her at this very moment. The princess took her seat at the head of the table, grateful for the physical barrier between them. Throughout the initial discussions, Zorava struggled to maintain focus. Every gesture Jack made, every modulation in his voice, sent unexpected pulses through her nervous system. This was not the cool, analytical approach that had made the Scylestrian diplomatic corps legendary. During a brief recess, Krell, her cultural advisor, approached. "Your Highness appears distressed," he whispered, his concern evident. "Is this normal?" she asked quietly. "This reaction to humans." Krell's scales shifted to a knowing pattern. "The ancient texts speak of it. Our species has a natural fear response to humans. They are unpredictable in ways our evolutionary history finds threatening." "Fear?" Zorava questioned. This didn't feel like fear, exactly. It felt like something else. Across the room, Jack was studying a Scylestrian star chart, his profile outlined against the holographic display. He caught her watching and offered another smile. The princess quickly looked away, feeling her scales flush again. "The human seems to have noticed your discomfort," Krell observed. "They may interpret it as disdain. That could be useful in negotiations. Humans respect strength." Zorava nodded absently. If her reactions were merely biological fear responses, she would master them. That's what her royal training had prepared her for. But as Jack returned to the table and their eyes met again, sending another wave of strange sensations through her body, Princess Zorava had the unsettling feeling that her people's understanding of humans and their effect on Scylestrians might be dangerously incomplete. 3 weeks into the peace negotiations, Princess Zorava's condition had not improved. If anything, her reactions to Jack Miller had intensified. Each morning, she prepared herself with meditation and breathing exercises developed by the royal physicians. Each afternoon, those preparations crumbled the moment he entered the room. "Your Highness, Today's agenda includes resource-sharing protocols, said Krell, sliding a data tablet toward her. The human delegation has requested more specific terms. Zarava nodded, her eyes fixed on the doorway. When Jack walked in, she gripped the edge of the table. "Princess," Jack bowed, less formally than their first meeting. "I hope you're well today." "Ambassador Miller," she replied, her voice carefully controlled despite the fluttering in her chest. "Please take your seat." The meeting proceeded, but a new problem had emerged. High Command had decided that to streamline negotiations, Princess Zorava and Jack Miller would now work directly on several key treaty sections. "This is unacceptable," Zorava told Commander Vex in private after the announcement. "Request an alternative arrangement." "I cannot, Your Highness," Vex replied, his scales shifting to a pattern of regret. "The human delegation specifically requested you, and your father, the Emperor, has already approved." Zorava paced the room, her royal robes swirling around her. "Then implement distance protocols. No meetings without at least 3 other officials present. 2 meters minimum separation at all times." Vex nodded, though his expression showed concern. "As you wish, Princess." The next day, Jack arrived at the smaller conference room, looking confused at the new arrangement. The table had been replaced with 2 workstations set far apart. 3 Silestrian officials sat along the wall, watching silently. "Is everything okay?" Jack asked, his eyebrows drawing together in what Zorava had learned was an expression of concern. "Merely a more efficient arrangement," she explained, not meeting his eyes. "Please review Section 12 of the proposed agreement." They worked in this awkward fashion for hours. The princess had mastered her visible reactions, but inside, her body betrayed her. Every time Jack spoke, her second heart fluttered. When he moved to retrieve a document, her scales rippled with color beneath her formal attire. During a break, Krell approached her private chamber. "Your Highness, the human seems troubled by the new protocols." He asked if he had caused offense. Zorava looked up sharply. "What did you tell him?" "That Silestrian royalty observes strict formalities," Krell replied. "But Princess, these symptoms you're experiencing, they're unusually severe. The royal physician is concerned." "I am managing," she insisted. Later that afternoon, disaster struck. As Jack was explaining a point about Earth's resource contributions, the ship's artificial gravity briefly faltered. Jack stumbled forward, instinctively reaching out, and his hand touched Zorava's arm. The contact lasted less than a second before he pulled back, apologizing profusely. But it was enough. The princess felt a shock wave travel through her entire nervous system. Her scales flashed brilliant colors before she could control them. "I'm so sorry," Jack said, looking mortified. "Are you all right?" For once, her diplomatic training failed her. "We will continue tomorrow," she managed before leaving the room. In her private quarters, Zorava pressed her hands against her face. The brief touch had imprinted on her skin like a burn, but pleasant rather than painful. This was becoming impossible to ignore. "Princess," Krell's voice came through the communication system. "The human has requested a private audience. He wishes to apologize formally." Zorava closed her eyes. She could not avoid Jack Miller forever. These negotiations were too important to her people. "Tell him," she said finally, "that I will see him tomorrow. And Krell, find me everything in our records about human Silestrian physical reactions. There must be more to this than we've been told." Jack arrived at the diplomatic chambers early, rehearsing his apology. He found Princess Zorava already there, studying charts on her datapad. "Princess," he began, his voice soft. "About yesterday." "It was a ship malfunction," she interrupted, her scales maintaining a careful neutral tone. "No apology needed." Jack nodded, though he wasn't convinced. Over the past weeks, he'd noticed her discomfort around him. The way she maintained distance, how her scales sometimes flickered with color when he entered a room. "I've been reviewing your proposal for the mining rights," Zorava continued, "all business. Your terms are..." Surprisingly fair. Jack settled into his chair, keeping the prescribed distance. We want this alliance to work, Princess. Earth doesn't seek to exploit your resources. Something in his sincerity made Zorava look up and really see him. His expression seemed genuine, lacking the deception her advisors constantly warned humans practiced. When their eyes met, the familiar flutter of her hearts began, but today it felt less alarming. Most species would demand more, she admitted. Maybe we're not like most species, Jack replied with a small smile. Over the next few hours, they worked through complex negotiations with surprising efficiency. Jack proved knowledgeable about interstellar commerce and respectful of Silustrian customs. Several times, Zorava caught herself leaning forward, forgetting the distance protocols. You've studied our culture, she observed during a break. Jack nodded. I spent months preparing for this mission. Your civilization's art and philosophy are fascinating. And yet our species has always been taught humans are unpredictable, dangerous. We can be, Jack admitted, but we can also be kind, loyal, creative. As he spoke, Zorava realized her reactions had changed. The nervous trembling remained, but it no longer felt unpleasant. It felt more like anticipation. Her diplomatic progress was interrupted by a blaring alarm. The lights in the chamber flashed red. Security breach in Section 4, announced the ship's system. All personnel implement safety protocols. Commander Vex burst into the room. Your Highness, we must move you to the secure chamber immediately. A rogue faction has boarded the ship. Jack stood quickly. Who are they? Anti-alliance extremists, Vex growled. They oppose any deal with humans. They hurried through the corridors, Vex leading the way with Zorava behind him and Jack at the rear. As they rounded a corner, a blast of energy scorched the wall beside them. 3 armed Silustrians blocked their path. The princess stays, one of them snarled. The human dies. Vex pushed Zorava behind him and returned fire, but was hit in the shoulder. As he fell, the attackers advanced. Jack acted without hesitation. He grabbed a fallen weapon, pushed Zorava into a side passage, and fired back, giving them cover. This way, he said, his hand briefly touching her back, as he guided her through unfamiliar service corridors. The contact sent waves of sensation through her body, but Zorava had no time to analyze it. They ran together, Jack somehow knowing the ship's layout better than she expected. How do you? I memorized your ship schematics. Standard procedure. They reached a maintenance shaft and climbed inside, Jack pulling the panel closed behind them. In the narrow space, they were pressed close together, their faces inches apart. Zorava's entire body hummed with awareness. Are you okay? Jack whispered, his breath warm against her face. Yes, she replied, surprised to find it was true. Despite the danger, despite their proximity, she felt safe. Security forces eventually secured the ship, but something fundamental had changed. As medical staff treated Commander Vex, Zorava watched Jack calmly answering questions from Silustrian officers. He had protected her without hesitation, showing loyalty she had been told humans couldn't possess. That night, alone in her chambers, Princess Zorava faced a troubling thought. What if everything she'd been taught about humans was wrong? Princess Zorava paced her private laboratory, away from the watchful eyes of her royal court. The security incident had changed everything. For days, she had replayed the moments in the maintenance shaft. Jack's protective stance, his steady breathing, the strange comfort she'd felt despite their dangerous situation. Your Highness, we've completed the analysis you requested, said Dr. Nix, the royal physician and Zorava's most trusted scientist. The results are unexpected. Zorava stopped pacing. Show me. Dr. Nix activated a holographic display showing 2 neural scans side by side. One glowed with the distinctive branching patterns of Silustrian brain activity. The other showed human neural pathways. This is Ambassador Miller's brain scan from his medical clearance, Dr. Nix explained. And this is yours, Your Highness. They look nothing alike, Zorava observed. Not in structure, no. But observe what happens when I overlay the activation patterns. The two images merge, and suddenly the differences became less important than the similarities. The flow of activity, the rhythm of neural firing, they matched with surprising harmony. This is impossible, Zorava whispered. Not impossible. Merely unprecedented, Dr. Nix corrected. We've been taught that humans are dangerous to us because they are chaotic, unpredictable. But these scans suggest something else entirely. Explain. Dr. Nix adjusted the display. Your neural patterns and the humans are complementary. When you experience those physical reactions, the racing hearts, the scale flushes, it's not a fear response. It's a recognition response. Recognition of what? Zorava demanded, though part of her already knew the answer. Compatibility, Dr. Nix said simply. Your nervous system recognizes something in his that resonates with your own. Zorava sank into a chair, her royal composure momentarily forgotten. That contradicts centuries of Silestrian belief about humans. Yes, it does. Dr. Nix looked troubled. Which raises another question. Why were we taught to fear them when our biology suggests otherwise? The princess stared at the merged neural patterns, remembering how her body had reacted to Jack's touch, not with revulsion but with something closer to recognition. Have you shared this with anyone else? She asked sharply. No, Your Highness. As ordered, this research remains confidential. Good. Keep it that way. Zorava stood, decision made. I need more data. Discreetly collect biological samples from other humans in the delegation and compare them with various Silestrians. Dr. Nix bowed. As you wish, Princess. But may I ask why? Because if I'm going to challenge centuries of belief, I need irrefutable evidence, Zorava replied. Over the next few days, Zorava maintained her diplomatic duties, while Dr. Nix conducted secret research. The princess found herself watching Jack during meetings, noticing details she'd missed before, how his breathing sometimes synchronized with hers, how he seemed to sense her moods despite limited understanding of Silestrian expressions. When Dr. Nix finally reported back, her findings were clear. The compatibility wasn't limited to Zorava and Jack. Many Silestrians and humans showed potential neural resonance, though the princess's readings were unusually strong. There's more, Dr. Nix added hesitantly. I examined historical medical records. There are scattered reports throughout our history of Silestrians experiencing similar symptoms around humans, but these cases were classified and buried. Someone didn't want this known, Zorava concluded. It appears so. And Princess. Dr. Nix hesitated. Recent scans show Ambassador Miller is beginning to exhibit physiological responses to your presence as well. Increased heart rate, pupil dilation, heightened neural activity in regions associated with attention and emotional processing. Zorava felt her scales flush blue with surprise. He's experiencing the same reaction. Not identical, but parallel. His biology is responding to yours just as yours responds to his. The princess turned to the observation window, watching the stars. Everything she'd been taught about humans and her own species was being challenged. As heir to the throne, she had a duty to pursue truth, no matter how uncomfortable. Prepare a complete report, she ordered, and search the ancient archives. If this compatibility was deliberately hidden, I want to know why, and by whom. The royal archives lay deep beneath the diplomatic vessel, a repository of Silestrian knowledge dating back millennia. Princess Zorava ran her fingers over the ancient data crystals, searching for answers. Dr. Nix had narrowed their search to records from the early contact era, when Silestrians first encountered humans. Your Highness, I found something, Dr. Nix called from across the archive chamber. These records were sealed by royal decree. Zorava hurried over, her royal robes swishing against the floor. Can you open them? Your genetic signature should override the seal, Dr. Nix explained. Only the royal bloodline has such authority. The princess pressed her palm to the crystal. It glowed briefly, recognizing her DNA, then projected a series of images and text above the reading station. Both Zerava and Dr. Nix gasped at what they saw. The record showed Silestrians and humans working together, living together, even what appeared to be mixed families. Most shocking were personal journals from a Silestrian prince named Zorith who described his deep connection with a human woman named Lena. "We are bound by more than politics," one entry read. "Our species share a biological harmony the elders wish to deny. When we are together, our minds and bodies recognize each other as kindred despite our different forms." "This changes everything," Zorava whispered. But why was it hidden? She scrolled through more records until she found a royal decree from over 3 centuries ago. It outlined the official position on human-Silestrian relations. All evidence of biological compatibility was to be classified, all personal connections prohibited, and a new narrative of natural wariness was to be promoted. It was deliberate, Dr. Nix realized. They created the fear response theory to prevent our species from bonding. But why? Zorava demanded. What threat could such connections pose? The answer came in the final documents, political analysis from the royal advisors of that era. They feared that close human-Silestrian relationships would undermine the empire's carefully stratified social system. If Silestrians began adopting human ideals of equality and self-determination, the entire power structure could collapse. They lied to preserve their control, Zorava said, anger coloring her scales a deep crimson. Generations taught to fear a connection that's natural. As she processed this revelation, her communication device chimed. A message from Jack requested a meeting to discuss the final treaty points. Zorava felt her dual hearts racing at just seeing his name. "What will you do with this knowledge, Your Highness?" Dr. Nix asked. "First, I need to understand it fully," Zorava replied. "Continue researching while I maintain the negotiations." When Zorava met Jack later that day, she found herself seeing him with new awareness. Every reaction her body had around him now made sense, not fear, but recognition on the deepest biological level. "Princess, are you feeling all right?" Jack asked, noticing her distraction. "You seem different today." "I've been researching some aspects of our shared history," she said carefully. "Anything interesting?" he asked. Zorava studied his face. Was he experiencing the same pull toward her that she felt toward him? Dr. Nix's scan suggested he might be. "Perhaps. I'm still processing my findings," she replied. As they worked through the treaty details, Zorava noticed Jack's reactions, how his pupils dilated when she spoke, how he leaned slightly toward her despite himself, how his voice softened when addressing her directly. Their meeting was interrupted when Krell entered urgently. "Your Highness, forgive the intrusion," he said, bowing low. "But the Royal Council has called an emergency session. Several council members have raised concerns about." He glanced at Jack. Inappropriate cultural integration during these negotiations. The implications were clear. Someone had noticed her changing behavior around Jack. "Thank you, Krell. I will attend shortly," she said, dismissing him. When they were alone again, Jack looked concerned. "Is everything okay?" "Political factions exist in every government," Zorava said carefully. "Some in my court resist change more strongly than others." As she prepared to leave, Jack reached out as if to touch her arm, then stopped himself. A gesture that spoke volumes. The princess made a decision. "Jack," she said quietly, "there may be things about our species' shared history that have been misrepresented. When I know more, perhaps we can speak of it." The Royal Council chamber buzzed with tense voices as Princess Zorava entered. 6 council members sat in a semicircle, their scales displaying patterns of concern and disapproval. At the center was High Counselor Drax, oldest and most conservative of the royal advisors. "Princess Zorava," Drax began, his voice carrying the formal resonance of official proceedings. We have called this session to address disturbing reports regarding your conduct with the human ambassador. Zorava took her seat, maintaining perfect royal posture despite her racing hearts. What reports concern the council so deeply? You have been observed showing unusual familiarity with the human, said Councillor Mira, her scales flashing with disapproval. The distance protocols have not been maintained. Your behavior suggests inappropriate interest. I have maintained all diplomatic protocols required for these negotiations, Zorava replied evenly. Drax leaned forward. Your scales tell a different story, Princess. They change color in the human's presence. Your royal physician has been seen conducting unusual tests. You have accessed sealed archives. So they were watching her. Zorava kept her expression neutral, though her mind raced. How much did they know about her discoveries? As heir to the throne, I have both the right and duty to understand our history fully, she countered, especially when negotiating with species we have limited diplomatic relations with. We are concerned that your judgment has been compromised, said Councillor Thax, the military representative. The treaty terms you've negotiated are unusually favorable to the humans. They are fair to both sides, Zorava corrected, which serves our long-term interests better than exploitation would. The council members exchanged glances that suggested they weren't convinced. Drax produced a formal document bearing the royal seal. By order of the Emperor, all direct negotiations between Princess Zorava and Ambassador Miller are suspended. Councillor Thax will take over as chief negotiator. The princess will return to the homeworld immediately for. Drax paused meaningfully. Proper reorientation. Zorava felt her scales flash with shock before she could control her reaction. My father ordered this. The Emperor understands the dangers of human influence, Drax replied smoothly, particularly on one so young. Zorava recognized the political maneuvering. The conservative faction was using her reactions to Jack as a pretext to take control of the negotiations, and possibly to challenge her fitness as heir. I will speak with my father directly, she said, rising from her seat. Communications with the Emperor have been temporarily restricted for security reasons, Thax informed her with poorly concealed satisfaction. After the recent attack, we must be cautious. They had planned this well. Zorava was being systematically isolated. Until your departure, you are forbidden from contact with any humans, Drax continued, for your own protection. Across the ship, Jack Miller was receiving similar news from his superiors. Admiral Lisa Grant looked uncomfortable as she delivered the message via secure channel. They're pulling you from the negotiations, Jack. Effective immediately. What? Why? Jack demanded. We're making excellent progress. The Silestrian Council claims you've been exerting undue influence on their princess. The Admiral sighed. Reading between the lines, they think there's something inappropriate happening between you two. Jack ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. That's ridiculous. We've maintained all diplomatic protocols. Nevertheless, they're sending her home and replacing her with some hardliner. The Admiral looked concerned. This could set negotiations back months, maybe years. After the call ended, Jack paced his quarters, troubled by a sense of wrongness that went beyond diplomatic concerns. In recent days, he'd found himself increasingly drawn to the princess, not just her intelligence or diplomatic skill, but something deeper he couldn't explain. Meanwhile, Zorava sat alone in her royal chambers, now under guard, for her protection. She reviewed her limited options. The knowledge she had discovered couldn't remain buried, not if there was any hope for true understanding between their species. She opened a secure channel to Dr. Nix. How quickly can you compile all our research findings into a single data package? A few hours, Your Highness. But what good will it do? The Council has restricted your communications. Zorava's scales rippled with determination. They've restricted my communications, but not yours. And there's one human who needs to see this truth as much as I do. Princess Zorava stood before the full Silestrian court, her royal attire gleaming under the ceremonial lights. After 3 days of effective house arrest, She had requested a formal audience, a right even the council couldn't deny an heir to the throne. Every important official was present, including the newly appointed negotiator, Councillor Thax. Members of the royal court, Zorava began, her voice steady despite her racing hearts. I come before you to challenge a deception that has divided our species from humans for centuries. Murmurs rippled through the gathered officials. High Councillor Drax rose to interrupt, but Zorava raised her hand, invoking royal privilege. For generations, we have been taught that humans trigger fear responses in our biology, that our trembling, our racing hearts, our scale flushes in their presence are warnings of danger. She paused, looking around the chamber. That teaching is a deliberate lie. The court erupted in shocked whispers. At the back of the hall, a side door opened quietly. Jack Miller slipped in, guided by Dr. Nix. Their presence was against all protocols, but Zorava had planned this timing carefully. I have discovered evidence in our sealed archives, she continued, activating a holographic display showing the ancient records. 3 centuries ago, our ancestors recognized a biological compatibility between our species. Not fear, recognition. The images shifted to show the neural scans, the historical documents, the suppressed research. Our ancestors feared this connection would threaten their power, Zorava declared. So they buried the truth and created a myth of natural aversion. Councillor Drax finally broke protocol. This is outrageous. The princess has clearly been corrupted by human influence. No, came a new voice. Dr. Nix stepped forward. As royal physician, I have verified these findings independently. The princess speaks truth that science confirms. Jack moved to stand near Zorava, though still keeping a respectful distance. The princess felt the now familiar sensation of her dual hearts synchronizing at his proximity. The human has no place in these proceedings. Thax protested. Ambassador Miller has every right to hear truth that concerns his species, Zorava countered. Then, turning to Jack, our bodies recognize something in each other that defies our physical differences. Not just mine and yours. Many Silustrians and humans share this potential for connection. Jack nodded, his expression serious but his eyes conveying understanding. On Earth, we've observed similar physiological responses among our diplomatic corps. We assumed it was stress from cross-species interaction. Zorava turned back to the court. For too long, we've maintained artificial distance based on lies. This has limited our diplomatic potential, our cultural exchange, our scientific advancement. What are you proposing, Princess? Asked a younger council member, her scales showing patterns of cautious curiosity rather than outrage. A new framework for human Silustrian relations, one based on truth, not fear. Zorava's scales shifted to the royal pattern of authority. I will personally oversee a complete revision of our diplomatic protocols. The court divided into factions before her eyes, the older members clustering around Drax in opposition, while younger officials showed signs of interest or acceptance. This changes nothing about the negotiations, Thax insisted. The treaty terms. The treaty will proceed, Zorava interrupted, but with full awareness of our biological compatibility. No more barriers based on false fears. She stepped closer to Jack, close enough that everyone could see the ripple of blue across her scales, a reaction she no longer tried to hide. Our species are different in many ways, she said, addressing the entire court but looking at Jack. But where our ancestors saw threat in this connection, I see possibility. Diplomatic relations should be built on truth, not convenient fiction. Jack smiled slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. On Earth, we have a saying, the truth will set you free. A wise philosophy, Zorava replied. Then, turning to face the court with royal confidence, I stand before you as heir to the Silustrian throne, and I declare an end to centuries of manufactured fear. Today marks the beginning of true understanding between our peoples. As the court erupted into debate, Zorava felt a profound sense of rightness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, the truth was finally in the open. and with it, the possibility of connection that transcended physical differences. Beside her, Jack stood as a symbol of that possibility, their unlikely alliance now a bridge between worlds too long kept apart by nothing more than ancient fear and political convenience.